Welcome to Impact Leaders with Magda Petryniak. My today's guest is Hadley Dean, a true powerhouse in the world of commercial real estate. Hadley Dean is a founder of MDC², a sustainable warehouse developer operating with a mission of building for good. Before, he was the CEO of EPP, Poland's largest shopping center owner, and he made his name for the managing partner for Central and Eastern Europe at Colliers. Hadley, what a pleasure.
Well, quite an introduction. Lovely to be here.
Oh, it's lovely to have you here. Okay, you have been in the industry for almost 30 years, and you are quite a standout, being known as a person who outperforms and beats the expectations of the market. Mm-hmm. Can you take us behind the scenes and share more about what is the core of your business approach in terms of building and scaling businesses?
Well, to be honest, I think it's my family, because that's the bedrock of stability. I always think that we're a bit like a three-pronged stool. You have your health, you have your work, and your family. And if you lose one of those legs of the stool, you may lose a second, and then the stool doesn't work. And I think one of the great things is, having a family that produces that kind of that feeling of warmth and love is a massive part of anyone's sort of growth and success, because that gives you the freedom to be a little bit more expansive and directive in other areas, like work.
I understand. Wonderful. Where for almost quarter of a century, you have been observing the market, watching the waves of change, development, transformation. Can you, for the audience not familiar with this industry, can you paint briefly what is the landscape at the moment? Where are we, especially here in Central Europe, in terms of commercial real estate and logistics?
Well, what we have seen since 2004, since the enlargement of the EU and Poland joining, is just a wave of growth. And I think a lot of people have wondered whether that growth would be coming to an end. And of course, COVID put on a different lens into and how we view business and life and family. And now the question is, can this growth continue? Because if you actually look at historically the GDP growth of Poland, I think there's only one other country, and it's Australia, that has seen over 30 years of positive GDP growth. So the key question is, can this continue? And my answer to that is absolutely yes, and it's just getting going. What you have is 600,000 SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, that produce 40% of the exports of this country. And you compare that to, let's say, to Slovakia, where you have the top 20 exporters, 19 are foreign owned. All that money is leaving Slovakia, correct, where that money is staying in Poland. So on top of incredibly strong, let's say, family-run businesses. So I often describe that Poland economically, I must add, economically is like Germany was in the 70s. You've got lots of families that are creating brilliant companies, and that wealth now is staying in Poland. And of course, on top of that, you've got really the end of friendly globalization, which is meaning more and more, let's say, manufacturing and nearshoring not going out to China. Yeah. You've got, huge energy issues in Western Europe and union issues as the right or the left takes more and more power in France or Germany. More and more manufacturing will be moving, let's say, to Poland. And then you've got a very, very strong economy. So this is Poland's moment. We will look back on the next 10 years economically in Poland and say these are or were the golden years. And I'm lucky to be a part of that.
It is, like the world's bank expert Marcin Piątkowski, Professor Piątkowski, calls that the golden era for Poland. However, signaling that we have to be very careful because the next years may bring also some risk. And I'm wondering, you sound very positive about the opportunities of doing business in Poland. Are you seeing any risks or threats for your business? You bet on Poland.
Yeah, I know Marcin well, and we actually, I met Marcin. We were in the same maternity classes. We were doing the paternity leave together.
Beautiful.
So I
God.
I met him 22 years ago, and we've stayed in touch. In fact, he stayed in my flat last summer with Rebecca. So when you speak to Marcin, he's right. There are, of course, some potential negatives, but when you look at, let's say, all of the things that could go wrong, let's say within Poland and the European Union, I think what we're seeing is the markets have reacted very favorably to the last election. We're seeing Poland move back more to the center ground, and in a European context where there's more and more people moving to the right, to the left, a lot more uncertainty. So actually, I think Poland stands out right at the moment as being like the sort of beacon of stability. So of course things can go wrong, as we've seen, in February 22. But I think Poland is very well placed to ride out the next 10 years.
Do you think the same message is repeated in the investors' offices across Europe and globally?
It's different. It's really interesting because the US investors are typically much more focused, more focused on what's happening to the East. Whereas the European Union investors, like some of our investors, were just saying, we've gamed 4 scenarios, and this was, let's say, back in June 2022. We've gained 4 scenarios, 3 of which all of Poland comes out on top, and the last one, then we've got nothing else to worry about anyway. So I think Poland is well positioned with the European investors because people understand what's happening in Poland much better than what's happening, let's say, in the US investors, because they're just a long, long way away.
That's correct. Every time I go to the World Economic Forum, especially in the Polish house, this same thing repeated over and over, the quality of Polish talent and the pool of talent, and also business acumen. This is all appreciated by foreign investors. What do you appreciate when you think about doing business in Poland?
Well, look, I could talk to the fact that, you have one of the lowest GDP debt ratios. I can talk to the fact that you've got 600,000 SMEs doing 40%. I could talk to the fact you've had positive GDP growth. But I think the thing that, for me, makes Poland stand out is that on a personal level, there is a very strong difference between right and wrong. The Poles have a really clear view of black and white view on what's right and what's wrong. And I love that. I think it's a great place to bring up a family. But I think, when I describe, let's say, Poland to my foreign, let's say, friends, is I say, Poles have this Northern European attitude to work and a Southern European attitude to family. And that makes Poland, for me, stand out.
I hear you. Yeah, that's wonderful. You're speaking a lot about how great place to invest is Poland. I wonder, what has doing business in Poland taught you personally? Did you get a tough lesson, or the lessons were more positive?
It's a really good question because I came to Poland as I think I was 29 and sort of took over Colliers, or asked to let's say run Colliers shortly thereafter. And I remember I was quite coming out of the West End of London as a young surveyor, quite arrogant and quite confident in my own abilities. And one of the things that I learned very quickly is you do not tell the Poles what to do.
Okay.
Oh my goodness! I
wonder what happens next.
Well, there was a complete revolution.
Okay.
And I was made to sit down, and I was told that this is not the way we do things.
I wonder. You also do not tell Poles what not to do, because you can get quite the opposite,
Exactly.
isn't it?
And
Okay.
so what I learned at a very, let's say, a young age in management was not to say, well, this is what I want you to do, is could you possibly consider?
Okay.
So that actually kind of set me very much up for married life well.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of starting businesses here, you know, Colliers was the first big probably assignment here in Poland. Next, you moved to starting bigger or your own businesses. In terms of collaborating with Poles, any lessons here?
Yeah, I think.
Any advice for for investors?
Yeah, I would say that you know, I actually often get asked this, and the best advice I can give is that you know, when you're talking to colleagues in Poland, I mean, professionality is a really big thing, and saying thank you very much, that was extremely professional, is really appreciated. And if you're upset with something, and this is not something you should use often at all, but you know, kind of almost the biggest insult is, you know what, I can't remember when I've seen a bigger, you know, something more unprofessional. So professionality is a big thing here. People want to be seen as being professional.
Beautiful. Hadley, your recent enterprise, MDC², by the way, I keep thinking what this abbreviation, what this term stands for, has the leading mission, building for good. Can you talk a bit about why is it so important for you personally?
We were all at a point in our lives where we were late 40s, early 50s. We'd been working for corporates all our lives. And we were fortunate enough to be in a position that we could set up a company for ourselves, for colleagues who've worked together for many, many years. And we wanted to do something different. And that was, you know, we had, you know, a special opportunity to do something different. And we talked earlier about all of this manufacturing moving into Poland. And the last thing that we want is these businesses be moving to Poland and creating dirty, great, you know, black power, smoke-filled factories in Poland. You know, we have a big enough problem because of the energy, you know, consumption here is, you know, 85% lignite and coal. So we really need to take this seriously. And there was a real gap in the market. And, you know, a lot of the developers were not focused on ESG or building green and weren't thinking about building buildings for the future. And that's how we came up with, okay, well, what is it? What is this phrase that drives every decision we make in the company? And it's building for good. So everything we do is about building for the good of the community, our investors, our team, and the tenants.
Yeah. This mission sounds very compelling, and it appeals to me a lot. I wonder, how do you translate the mission into the company's KPIs? Like, is it embedded in the every second phase of the investment plan, of the building, of managing? Is it related? Like, is it just, you know, a beautiful mission that attracts tenants and communities, or is it embedded in the business results?
Well, I think, again, it's a really good question, because what people are becoming very in tune to is the BS that comes around mission statements and company values. And, you know, for me, and for all of us, like when anyone sees company values on the wall, it basically means they're not living and breathing within the company. And so, you know, you have to be able to articulate very clearly how that mission statement is delivered on a wet Tuesday afternoon in Warsaw. And if you cannot articulate it, and if your team cannot articulate it, and if your investors can't articulate it, and if your tenants can't articulate it, honestly, you're not doing a good enough job. And one of the benefits of having a, you know, relatively small company, we're only 20 people, but we're all professionals. We've done this for many, many years. There's no sort of kids in the business. We know what we're doing, and that was driven by them.
I get it. Okay, let's imagine I'm joining the executive team of MDC² and I'm entering the executive boardroom today. What would I experience, like firsthand, from the colleagues or, you know, in the room, in the company's corridors?
Well, a lot of laughter, a lot of laughter. There's very little fear in our business. We don't believe in having fear in a company. I think, you know, in very simplistic terms, you can, you know, the two biggest sort of emotions are kind of love and fear. And you can run businesses in two ways. You can have a really top-down and command and control structure, which is run by fear. And typically they're highly effective for a short period of time. It's a little bit like a slave ship. You know, if you go back to the Roman times, you have lots of slaves and you've got a big drum and you've got to say, you will do this, you will. And they row off and they're incredibly effective. And what happens is the slaves start dying quicker than they can be replaced. And I'm very much, and Maciej and Jeremy are the same, we believe in, you know, an upside down pyramid leadership structure, a reverse pyramid. So, you know, our clients are effectively our team. And, you know, the management team's job is to be listening to the people who are actually on a day-to-day basis talking to the farmers, the tenants, the mayors. And we need to be making sure that the good ideas are bubbling back at the top and making sure that we're not missing a competitive advantage. So that there's a lot of laughter, a lot of freedom. So I think, you know, that would be, so there's a lot of freedom. We don't want to micromanage people. I mean, no, who wants to be micromanaged?
Not me.
Yeah, I mean, you
honestly
employ adults, and then we operate very much from a base of, you know, responsibility. So if we're hiring adults, they're responsible. And if someone drops the ball, it's not okay to say, you know what, you dropped the ball and I'm not going to help you. Everyone picks up the ball and then takes it down the pitch with everyone else. And thirdly, there's this like sense of, let's say, partnership. And what partnership kind of means to us as a business and as a team is we have each other's backs. And it's not just in the good times, you know, when there's bereavements, sickness, we actually look after each other. I mean, it's not rocket science, but people want to know that actually people have got their backs and their colleagues, their friends. It's not a charity, but let's look after each other. And then finally, there needs to be this sense of sort of fairness and decency that drives through the business. And that, you know, if I had to describe how we operate, those four words would describe it the best.
Beautifully. I wonder what has shaped that approach, that philosophy in your life. Let's imagine, there's a lot of imagining today in the program, that I'm a fly on a wall and I'm looking at a very early childhood, you know, situation. Do you remind or can you recall the event or situation that really was that defining moment when you were thinking, okay, I want to go into business. I know the business will be led in this particular way?
No, it's way earlier.
Was it?
Way earlier.
Was it? Okay, no, how early did it start?
So I was fortunate, or my wife may say I was unfortunate, to go to what we call private schools in the UK, which so it meant I was at a boarding school from the age of 7. And so I remember very clearly, you know, at the age of 7, waving goodbye to my mother and father and sister, thinking like, you know, what have I done wrong? Like they're leaving.
They leave me.
They've got like 300 sort of boys in this school, and I'm like, crikey, how's this going to work? But what it gave me was a huge amount of freedom. What it gave me was I really had to quickly understood that I am responsible. What it gave me was, my goodness, I better have other people's backs and other people better have my back, because I'm not, you know, I don't have my parents to look after me. And what it gave me was also a really strong sense of decency. and behaving in the right way, and that sense of just pure fun. So it came back, that goes all the way back to when I was 7.
Wow. When did you found yourself interested in the real estate sector?
Well, it's really people. I mean, what I love about property is that, you kind of have to touch it. It's tangible. It's not something, it's not just like a piece of paper. It's something that you can really touch and see, and you can see how it evolves. And I love that. But primarily, I mean, real estate is one of the most social, people-orientated businesses there are. It's a fantastic industry to get into. And I was lucky to do some work experience, and I could see it. It was very people-orientated, and that was something that I appreciated.
Yeah, you are very people-orientated. I can sense it. So, what were the moments in this whole journey that were the toughest for you? Like, did you have that moment of maybe regret or doubt, or just a difficult time in this whole path? And can you share briefly about it? Because we very often share these success stories, and it sounds so easy and natural, but life, especially in business, is not a bed of roses. There are many moments probably of doubt. And I wonder, was there a moment in your life that you had to stop and rethink and maybe start from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, many. And that's where, it's always, what makes you the person you are. It's, 20 people throughout my life who have, let's say, had a big impact in helping me grow as a young professional and as a leader, and they certainly know who they are. But yeah, I would say the first moment of complete self-reflection was that kind of mutiny in the first 6 weeks of coming to Poland, where everyone, this is not how it works.
Yeah.
And then you realize, and I realized very quickly, that I needed to change my approach. I needed to be much more sympathetic. I needed to much more understand what was going on and why, rather than just coming in and just saying this is how it's going to be. The second really challenging, I think, period for us as partners in Colliers Poland was the death of one of our partners. That was a really big moment, and it led to a lot of self-reflection. I think the third big area of where I questioned who I was and what I was doing was when we had 50 people walk out the door in Moscow and go across to a competing company in 2 weeks. It's just amazing. And then, after 15 years at Colliers, I decided I wanted to have a go at being an entrepreneur, and was thinking this is a great idea, and set up a business with an Asian group called Compass Offices to kind of set up a serviced office business.
Yeah. And
we were going to be kind of in between WeWork and Regis, so kind of like WeWork without the beer and the dogs, like a more professional WeWork. And it was an unmitigated disaster. I learned I was way too trusting, and I was very, very lucky to get out of it with my equity intact that I put into the business. And I was grateful for the support I had from friends at the time. So those would be, I can go on. I mean, you're always learning. And
it's very important lessons. If you allow me to stop for a minute, you talked about transitioning from this corporate work into starting your own business. And I hear that from many leaders I collaborate with, that there is this dream that maybe what's next after the corporate life, and many dream about setting up their own business, which turns out not to be so easy because these worlds are completely different. Can you share about your journey, this transitioning from the corporate to your own business. What were these stepping stones or the founding blocks of changing the mindset into, okay, now I'm the owner, I'm the leader, and I'm setting the business on my own rules?
Well, I mean, to be fair, you know, I'm very lucky. I've got partners, so I was never, let's say, just the leader. And it's very important to have partners who, you know, who complement each other. But I'm going to ask you a question. What is, statistically, what is the best age to set up a business?
50 plus.
44.
44? Okay. But
Yeah.
it's older than younger, isn't it? It's
Absolutely.
much older than what we think. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're, you know, and this is why I'm very much, you know, I really am concerned about a lot of the young people who go off and say, oh, I'm going to be the next, you know, this and that.
Yeah.
And there are, you know, for every one that has happened, there's, you know, 1 billion that have failed. And so, you know, it's super important to go out and get a profession, something you can fall back on if something all goes wrong. To become the very best in what you do and really build up around, let's say, a good support network where you are an expert in your industry. And 3, you know, opportunities will present themselves. It's not, you know, don't force it. It will come. You will be in the bath. I mean, that's very British, but you'll be somewhere. You'll be walking through Campinos and an idea will come, and don't be afraid to run with it. Look at it, really think about it, talk it through with friends that you trust. And, you know, it's, you know, at 44, sadly, usually you have a lot of obligations. You've got your kids usually at school, you've got to pay your mortgage. So it's not easy to give up it's not easy to give up a corporate salary. I know from example, I rued the day that I left Colliers and went to this other company for about 6 months. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, I got an amazing opportunity to found and list what became the largest property company in Poland. And that was, you know, if I'd been at Colliers, I'd have never had that opportunity.
There is a beautiful saying by Professor Arthur Brooks from the Harvard Business School that the most important things happen between the tides. And sometimes when we are on this corporate tide, everything looks glamorous, or is at least, you know, in kind of a system that is organized. And then that time, the break between, you know, something ended, but the next big thing has not appeared, has not come yet. This can be a very scary moment, but as you're describing, this can be a very important moment to be observer of what can present to ourselves, to meet people. So I love that saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely spot on. And you have to be able to receive the messages and be open in a space where you can actually see the opportunities. And sometimes, you know, when you're working really hard, it's just that you have no capacity. And you also need good friends.
Yeah.
Because it's your good friends, and I can point to a handful around these difficult times where they were there and they came through and they came up with ideas and opportunities. And you know, I come back to there are probably 20 people who have made me who I am, and there's probably 20 people who've made them, and it's super important we now pass that on to other people. And
that's super beautiful, especially in the world that the loneliness is becoming another epidemic, and especially in the boardrooms. Like sometimes it's hard to share how you feel with the rest of the company. So you're describing how great you know, system of support you have in your life. I wonder what other elements of your system of protection and growth have you built? What is helping you to kind of recover after a tough moment?
Well, I'm you may have heard of an organization called YPO.
I do.
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate to be, you know, a member of YPO, and I'm in a really, you know, incredible forum. And you know, that gives me a real good sounding board
Good.
Beyond, my family and my friends, then I have, a group of people who have got no other interest apart from to help me, but all look at things from a different perspective. So that's also been very helpful and a big part of, my growth and their growth and things like that.
Yeah. John Lynch was the first guest in this.
Oh, was he?
He
Right.
was. He was speaking very fondly about the whole system support and also about this kind of monitoring where you are in your life on the scale of different spheres of life, like health and career, personal life. So, so thank you for sharing that as well. You speak about how great, how important family is in your life and in your development. What lessons are you trying to teach your kids and pass to them?
So I was sitting in at a dinner party in Helsinki about 6 months ago, and something really shocked me. That it was a people, they're all sort of 45 to 55. They all had businesses, and they were quite openly talking about how they're not going to hire people under 35. They're just fed up of hiring this new generation because they're difficult to manage, they're difficult to lead, they're constantly asking for things. And I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
I'm lucky enough to have 5 daughters.
Wow.
So, and it's a big source of concern. And I think it was a really good interview on Barack Obama. And he was basically saying, like, what do you look for? When the interviewer asked him, what do you look for? He said, one of the things I really look for is the people who quietly help, who just get stuff done.
Yeah.
That is thinking about the next step and actually helping, rather than thinking like, what's in it for me? And I think that's super important with the kind of the new generations, let's say, coming through, let's say my kids, is that there's so much instant gratification.
Right.
You've got to put in the hard yards, and you've got to get a profession. You've got to work. It's not easy, and you've got to see it through. And there are going to be ups and downs, but it's going to be okay, just like it was for everyone else.
That's correct. What I hear from the young generation, to look at on the other side of the pond, is the constant pressure to achieve, to be perfect. So the young generation also feels that requirement, to be perfect, to be already ready for business at the age of 16 or 17. So there's also a lot of pressure we put on the young generation,
that's really
isn't
true.
it?
It's incredible. I mean, I was, you look at 15, 16-year-old, and they're already doing PowerPoint presentations in front of 200 people, and you're like, my goodness. I mean, I was, could barely catch a rugby ball.
Correct.
I think that's a very, very valid point. There is a lot more pressure, and there needs to be a kind of this sense of fun and play. And I think, one of the biggest things to do is also, it's difficult to do, but pick your boss as best you can. Your boss is super important, because you've got to be open to feedback. And this is one of the challenges is with the younger generation. There is this constant pressure, but if you give these younger generation feedback, it's like, if it's not anything else apart from positive, it's like, oh my God, you've got to be able to take a bit of criticism. You've got to toughen up. It's about perseverance. It's not about flicking through Instagram.
Correct. Yeah. Hadley, my closing ritual is asking about definition of success. I often bring the question and the theme of Professor Clayton Christensen, how will you measure your life? And his famous talk at Harvard Business School. So what is your definition of success?
Well, what I can tell you is when I'm on my deathbed, and I'm dying, I'm not going to be saying, I wish I worked harder. I wish I had, gone on more business meetings. I think, any of us are going to be looking at our family life, our health, and our business. So from a business perspective, what I think the definition of success is how do you leave businesses? Are they in a better position when you leave? And after 5 years, after you've left, have you left something that is more sustainable and better when you look back 10 years on? And that's, with Monica Reiske, who took over Colliers, I mean, she's developed a business that is way better than I ever developed it. And, with EPP, Thomas Trislow is taking that business to a completely different level. And I hope that, when my journey at MDC² comes, it's a way better company and it's way better run. And that, for me, is the definition of success from a business perspective, of course.
Yeah. And from a personal perspective?
I'm still married. My kids are healthy and well.
Beautiful.
And I'd like to be able to find, when I retire, something that gives me the same excitement and energy outside work.
Cool. So the last closing one, we are talking here about the impact leaders. You are the impact leader I look up to. Who is the impact leader you look up to?
Oh my goodness. Well, Prabhat Gatsik from Petryniak. He's such, and there's many others, but I think to me, I've known him for 15 years incredibly well, and he defines modern, young Polish leaders.
That's beautiful. This program is not only for Polish leaders, it's for global leaders who lead with the mission to impact, to leave the world a better place. It was a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
And keep shining and changing the world.
Likewise.
Thank you.